In a very famous TED Talk, Sir Ken Robinson talks about schools killing creativity. And I think we as parents know this on a gut level. So let's talk about this and see what we can do about it. So, for those who might not know you, could you please introduce yourself? What do you do?
My name is Costas Constantinides. I'm a psychologist. I've been working in education for at least 20 years now. And I am the founder and facilitator of the Lighthouse Educational Institute, where we practice more progressive, some call it alternative educational philosophy, and that we soon hope to, very soon, to be formalizing that into a primary school and later a secondary school. The Lighthouse has been around for it'll be 10 years, exactly in January.
So why we as parents should actually bother about school and school system?
There's very little flexibility, and it's essentially a one-size-fits-all recipe. And most schools, most traditional schools, follow an age-based model. So you start at the age of 6 or 7, depending on what country, and then you get this, you just follow that level year after year, with very little regard for what your interests are, what you'd like to learn, what you're good at. And so this is the model that was created 150 years ago. The goals for education back then were very simple: to create a functional society that could read and write with a few highly educated experts. And those along the way that sort of fell out of the school, they were considered acceptable losses to the system.
So we hear more and more often, like in recent decades, I think that especially from the famous TED Talk from Sir Ken Robinson, that schools kill creativity. How come is that? So?
Okay, well, he gives the wonderful example of the paperclip. And if you ask a young child of 4 or 5 years old, how many things can you use this paperclip for? The child can come up with 80 or 90 or more scenarios. If you ask a teenager, an 18-year-old, the same question, they struggle to come up with 4 or 5. So it's not that the teenager is incapable of coming up with these vast possibilities. It's just that they have become afraid to get it wrong. They have learned to look for the correct answer. They have learned to do what's expected of them, basically to conform and provide what's on the curriculum, what the teacher is teaching. As the teachers typically do, they teach to the test. What at the end of the term, what are the goals? And there is no movement away. So the child who wants to learn more, who wants to express him or herself more, has almost no options. And they're frowned upon by the teachers because they're actually delaying the class from reaching their objectives.
From your perspective, because we still, the traditional school system is still dominating, let's say that, let's face it, this is true. But from your perspective, what should be the core principles in any school as of now, let's say, so we actually meet the current needs of the population instead of just let's give the baseline for everyone? Let's meet the current need, and what this current need might be from your perspective?
I'm sure if you ask different people, different educators, you would get different answers, and that's fine. I mean, it's a question of perspective or values, and from country to country, they do emphasize different priorities. I think in Finland they prioritize problem solving, whereas in Norway I think they emphasize creativity, and in Sweden they emphasize social well-being, and they're all valid priorities, and so each one has its benefits. Of course, it comes at an opportunity cost. At the Lighthouse, we try not to be married to one doctrine or too dogmatic. We like to have a flexibility. So in order to have that flexibility, we created 4 foundations. One is that we keep classes relatively small, so maximum size is approximately 12 students. The second is that we try to make the lessons as motivating and as interesting as possible. And to do this, we spend a lot of time using hands-on or experiential learning. So learning by doing, we find, is much more effective than just the theory. And thirdly, we introduced and we built the model of philosophy that we have around the idea that students will learn at different speeds and in different subjects. So our approach is to have ability-based education instead of age-based. So a child who's really ahead of his or her peers in a certain lesson can level up for as long as needed or indefinitely. Or opposite, if they need more time, they can level down again. Part of the emphasis here is on confidence. We, as opposed to the traditional schools that emphasize achieving grades, and the grades becomes the alpha and the omega. For us, it's confidence and student satisfaction, that they enjoy their learning and they feel that they're capable of learning. And you don't need grades for this, surprisingly. And the fourth foundation for the Lighthouse is that the child's educational program is owned by a team of people, not by a ministry or a school principal or controlled by a preset curriculum. This team would include outside agencies, if necessary and where possible, but includes the children's teachers, the children's parents, school counselors, whoever can and needs to be involved with this, and of course, above all, the child needs to be an active member of the team and responsible for, as they get older, for creating their own or co-creating their own educational program so that they feel empowered. And this allows for the flexibility and for the respect for the child, him or herself.
That's very interesting what you're saying. And I assume there might be some challenges while you're building this flexible curriculum, because you need to sort of, at one point you engage people and you want to co-create, but at the same point the interests might be different. How do you manage this?
It's not always definitely not always a black and white. The phrase I sometimes use is that let's try whatever works philosophy when there is a disagreement. So I can give you an example of a young student we had who was about 7 years old, who just didn't like handwriting, which is something I could relate to from my personal experience as a child. Maybe it's because I'm left-handed and left requires a different connection to the brain. And we had this debates with the team at the time, the parents, the teachers, about whether how important handwriting was, or whether he could go straight to keyboarding, which he already knew, of course, by the age of 7, or if he should learn to have this appropriate, elegant, cursive writing that we're all taught in schools. The teacher was pretty much a little bit on the old school side, that everyone should learn to how to do this, whether they use it or not, to have elegant handwriting. It's good for many reasons. And I'm not going to disagree that, I always envious of those who have this wonderful handwriting. But my point of view, for some reason or other, is that that should be a personal choice. In that they should at least learn, I agree with the, to spell and to write and to be able to put whatever they need to in, but written by hand, but only to the bare minimum. Now, who gets to make this decision? Who has the final word on this? Mm-hmm. And this is why we have a team approach. And I think that we can agree to disagree. And sometimes it may come down to a little bit of a vote. If the parents and the child, and some people feel that let the family have the choice, they can go down that road. Mm-hmm. Although I would argue that if you found a context in which handwriting was important, and especially elegant handwriting, or you could demonstrate to the child, the zen of handwriting and the power of being able to focus your mind and thoughts into your self-expression, that will be of huge value too. So for me, part of the approach would be let's try and help the child see the meaning of the education that we are co-creating, and not just take it or leave it. Yeah, the form, the empty form.
And if we're coming back to the traditional school system, for the parents who might have their kids in the school, what are the risks that you would associate right now with the traditional system for kids, of course, and maybe for parents, for families, I don't know.
All right, I'll give you two extreme examples. Some children who are very bright do quite well in the traditional education. And they're good because they're people pleasers. They want to please their teachers, they want to get the good grades, and they've come to believe that the grade represents their ability, their cleverness, their identity. And the problem right there is that this is, speaking as a psychologist now, this is an overemphasis on external validation. And this actually harms the child's confidence. They feel that they need this approval. And if they don't get a good grade, they are somehow failing as a person. And this leads to cheating. This leads to anxiety. This can lead to all kinds of symptoms and reactions when people are motivated by external rewards. And if you take this even a step further, the implied message with grades is that you do what you do for the reward, and later on when you finish with your education, you will also find a good job and get the reward. And when you have enough rewards, you will be happy. That life is about the reward, which of course I think anyone who thinks this through for a minute will realize that doesn't hold true. And the other problem with traditional education is that because it doesn't adjust and accommodate to where a child is or what the child's interests or how they like to learn, children can lose their motivation. The grades don't affect some children for one reason or another, and they just shrug. Why should I bother? And this accounts, I think, in part for the high dropout rates. So we see as much as 15 to 20% across most modern countries, which is extremely high by the time they're 14 or 15 to have already given up on their education and have a bad taste in their mouth about learning, about reading books or educating themselves in other ways. So those are two extremes that show that the system, I think, is essentially failing the children. And it's not that children fail in the schools, it's the schools fail them. And that's why we need to rethink education.